Hey homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. Welcome to Miles Away Farm. My name is Jennifer. I thought I would do a video showing you my 2023 potato harvest. I did a bunch of things differently this year, and I really had one of the best potato harvests I've ever had. So I thought I'd share some of that wisdom with you. I'm just going through the varieties here that I planted this year. Most of my potatoes came from Fedco out of Maine. That's my primary location that I order potatoes from, and I do make a point of ordering potatoes organically. They are one of the highest pesticide residue vegetables that you can buy, and so I really prefer to grow those organic.
So during the deep dive that I did into potato growing last fall, I ended up making this huge spreadsheet of all different types of potatoes and the different character traits of potatoes. And this is the list that I wish every single seed potato grower would include in their catalog. It makes me crazy that this stuff isn't consistent between vendors. A lot of times they don't include the texture, whether it's starchy, waxy, or all-purpose, and most especially how well it holds in dormancy. I have found that blue potatoes and red potatoes are always the first to sprout in storage, and it would be great to know that up front. Some potatoes are just best for fresh eating and don't really store well, and that's totally fine, but it would sure be nice to know that before you stuff them in your pantry only to find them sprouting legs later. This is a visual of the entire potato row right before we dug it. And a lot of the potatoes that are in here have completely died back. And so while there's a lot of green in this row, most of what you're seeing is actually just weeds that have kind of gotten a foothold. I use a wooden stake between each variety, and then I put a tag against that stake that says what the variety is so that I can keep track. I have not had good luck growing potatoes in bags and towers. And so I just grow my potatoes in the ground because we have room for that, and it gives me the best yield. Potatoes are a New World crop, meaning they come from the Americas. They originated in the Peruvian area, and they are members of the nightshade family. So they are actually related to tomatoes and peppers, and you should take that into consideration when you're thinking about crop rotation. Potatoes are a cool season crop, and this was a big revelation to me that I'd never really spent a lot of time thinking about. They want to be planted when your soil temperature is at about 50 degrees, and I'll put a link below to a really great website where you can estimate your soil temperature in the spring. And then once it gets really hot in the summertime, they are really not happy. And so the more growth that you can get in that early spring, the better. They will take a light frost, and if you get a hard frost, they will usually die completely back to the ground and then resprout. And so it's tricky to get that window right in terms of exactly when to plant them, because you really don't want them to frost because it slows them way down, but you want that soil to still be cool enough that they're going to get some good growth. You'll see information on potatoes being determinate or indeterminate. Indeterminate means that they will continue to grow. Determinate means they kind of put on all the crop at once and then they're finished. For my growing season and for most places in the country, it doesn't really matter because you're just going to harvest them all at once. So unless you're getting really creative with a garden tower where you're constantly filling it in and you have a very long growing season where you can do that, not paying any attention to whether it's determinate or indeterminate is just fine. You don't have to worry about that. Ideally, potatoes like a slightly acidic soil. My soil is not acidic. My soil tends to be between 7 and 7.5. And so they will do fine even in a slightly alkaline soil, but they prefer acidic if they can get it. And they want a nice rich soil, but they don't want really strong nitrogen available. So if you've got fresh manure and you plant your potatoes in it, they tend to get what's called scab. And so the outside of that skin will get scabby if your nitrogen is really hot. And so it's kind of tricky to get the right amount of nitrogen so that they get lots of growth, but not so much that you're going to start getting scab. A good yield is about, for every 1 pound of potatoes you plant, you want to get about 10 pounds of harvest. And so if you're in that ballpark, you're doing pretty good, but it's going to vary a lot based on the variety and also obviously your growing conditions. And when you plant your potatoes, you want to plant them fairly shallow. And this was a big change that I made this year. I was really planting my potatoes way too deep. The potato tubers actually form above the seed potato that you plant. And so my assumption was that I should put that seed potato about 12 inches down in the ground, so about the length of a shovel. And I finally realized I'd been planting them way too deep. And so really you just want them 1 to 4 inches below the soil, deeper if you're in southern climates, because it helps keep them a little bit cooler in temperature, but not planting them terribly deep. And mine were much shallow this year. And then you want to plant most potatoes about 12 inches apart. So not super, super far away. I had been doing a much wider spacing, and 12 inches is plenty. And if you're planning on planting potatoes for storage and not just fresh eating, the longer you can leave them in the ground to where the plant really starts to die back, the better they are going to store. I have a lot of issues with gophers in my soil, and so we just went ahead and dug this entire row. The stuff at the early part of the row was completely died back. The stuff towards the end of the row that was a little later harvest in terms of how long it took to maturity, you can see there's still some green plant on there, but we just dug them all at once because I've had gophers come in and just devastate the potatoes that I have. I usually end up with a few potatoes that have some green skin on them from being too close to the surface, even though I do hill them and mulch them a little bit. I usually just save those potatoes for planting the next year. You can also just scrape that skin off and eat them. If you're going to save potatoes from year to year, they do accumulate viruses over time, and you won't really see it in the quality of the plant. You'll just get a smaller and smaller harvest every year. And so every couple of years, I will just buy new seed potatoes rather than continuing to plant from potatoes that I've saved from the previous year. But we had an amazing harvest this year. This variety is called Pinto, which is one of my favorites. And I'm really excited to be canning and freezing and eating some of these potatoes through the winter, and I'll bring you along for some of that. Thanks for watching, Tribe. If you like this kind of content, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave me a comment, and share. I have new content coming out every week.